In the conversation that I have with Eric Martin, you will hear us discussing the ways in which adaptive leadership might be used to help make sense of the COVID crisis. Eric, thanks so much for joining me. As we get started, how has adaptive leadership been helpful to you and to the groups that you work with in making sense of COVID?
One of the gifts of this moment is that COVID-19 is breaking the addictive hold of normalcy. That January, that mindset that, well, we would never make that choice. So, it's interrupting a habit, and to do that is to make it visible in this way and turn it from a given into a choice. So when the emergency subsides, I think we're going to have an occasion to ask what parts of that normal do we want to return to, and what parts have we seen during this break in the routines that we might want to bring into the future. It's kind of like that core emerging legacy notion from adaptive leadership. The typical institutional response to this kind of moment is to find an enemy. Institutions are good at fighting enemies. The enemy could be the coronavirus, it could be China, the enemy is fake news, the enemy is the media, the enemy is liberals. Like, I don't also want people to have to come together because of fear. Can we find another way, another thing to come around together that isn't just about that? Because like you, Jill, I'm sure over my lifetime, I've seen society place more and more emphasis on safety, security, and risk reduction. What is the more beautiful world, that our hearts know is possible in this moment, that we're getting little glimpses of people coming together, people sacrificing their own comfort to save an elderly person maybe they don't know and won't ever meet. Like, those choices are not insignificant. And it's not that those have to be scaled to a million people to be meaningful. I think they're meaningful in and of themselves.
In facing all the challenges that emerge in the face of COVID, in what ways is authority both a resource and a constraint?
An authority response has a useful time to a point. The problem becomes, of course, when we overuse authority and technical responses in this emergency phase and then think we've solved the problem.
As you're talking, who comes to mind for me is Jacinda Ardern, and what she's done in New Zealand is
Yeah.
your authority to create calm, to create clarity, to connect folks to purpose. She hasn't just said stay home, she said stay home and save lives. She's used a very crisp, clear 4 levels of how we're going to,
Yeah.
what the ask is going to be of you and what the rules are going to be around here. And she's repeated that again and again. So I think it is easy for folks when they step into adaptive leadership work to somehow get the impression that it's a dismissal of authority or an underplay. And, I know we've talked about this before. I actually think that there's powerful work to be done about how do you use authority effectively without abusing authority? How do you use that authority to hold people in these moments of absolute disruption when what they long for is, the kind of cozy pod, as we would talk about in this adaptive language of protection, order, direction.
I think hers is such a good example. And the other things I would draw, which is what authority should do in a moment of emergency, is presence. So, the etymology, the literal translation of presence is to feel in front of other people. So really being present, but also being present regularly. So she made herself very available to the media, long beyond what others had offered as heads of state. So real presence, because people in these times of uncertainty have this instinctual response to look for authority. They want to feel comforted. It's kind of like when you go to the doctor, even with COVID, and they can't do anything for you, maybe hopefully mild symptoms, yet just having them lay their hands on you or see you, you feel all of a sudden that things are better. And it's the same thing with heads of state. She's done that well. She's really spoken to people's experience across the spectrum, both the hopeful side, the purpose side, as well as the painful side. And we need to be available so others feel like they don't just have to be optimistic, or that it's okay, to be optimistic when others are suffering. So she, I think, has held that well. She's maintained her poise brilliantly, which I think, again, is one of those things. And then lastly, really drove the prepared responses where they were available, but was able to admit that, we don't have all the answers. We need to weigh into this together. So it's such a great example, I think, again, of authority, but in the way that you're talking about, which is creating the conditions for people to take on the crisis phase, the adaptive phase, which is where leadership is needed.
Yeah, absent strong authority structures, my sense is there's very little room for adaptive work to happen, very little room for more people to step into the work of leadership. I think otherwise that energy ends up expended trying to create the container that authority provides when it's done well.
Why do we want to have authorities in our lives? And I think it's because we're all grappling in different ways with big questions. Institutions are failing us, and be it the institution of marriage or gender or anything else. And so I think this is a moment of extreme possibility, and that disorientation of possibility maybe is leading to things like safety, ironically. So again, a perfectly aligned system, nothing accidental.
If we amp up a need for safety, what comes with that is a need for authority at a moment when I would say two things are true. One is there is the sense that the emperor has no clothes. All the cracks in authority are showing. And at a moment when, thanks to things like the internet, the many have a voice in a way that has, only been true in the last decade. So both of those forces are deeply threatening to conventional authority structures. So I like that notion that, what do? We turn up the volume on the need for safety as a way to perpetuate the need for authority.
If our attention is a resource and we're giving it to these places instead of to each other or to the community, there you have it right there. That's the bargain. That's the transaction that we're stuck in.
The most finite of our resources.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I do think in that self-soothing that we tend to go to, that people either will want to go back. There's this whole thing of how do I go back? How do I make it like it was? Or without the acute pressure they're experiencing right now, once that lets up, so will their hunger for innovation and adaptation. At the same time, they'll have very personal evidence that they are capable of pivot. They are capable of renegotiating the rules when it matters. And so, my hope is that collectively what we begin to see is all these individuals making adaptation. None of us are getting through this without adapting, right? I mean, that is the case. It is in every home, in every organization, in every business. And so the notion that we have it in us is, I believe, contagious. And we're going to have a whole lot of data to look back on. But I do think that, Eric, the question you raise is a key one. Will that just stay in the rearview mirror, or can we actually bring that forward and codify that as work that we are all invested in, adaptation and working, as you call them, the kind of crisis level adaptive issues that now are, out in plain sight.
Now or after the crisis, I have to believe that this kind of experience, that's almost universal across all of the world and humanity right now, is going to touch us in different ways that will lead to different choices that are more about the whole and less about maximizing my own individual, self-interest.
I see evidence of that hopeful spirit in the choices we're making in this very moment.
What we can't seem to keep in stock right now is seeds. And what does that say about us as a country if what we can't keep in stock are seeds? I love it. This means that people believe in the future. It means that they're, connected to the earth.
I haven't heard that. That's amazing.
Growing things, this notion of growth and abundance and, care for myself, care for my family, care for my community, and really rethinking what is home and garden and, nourishing ourselves about. Yeah. Who would have guessed that would be the thing?
I mean, I know guns were in hot demand early on, but seeds too. That's amazing. Guns and seeds.
Yeah, right. But what do seeds feel like? And what's the interpretation of seeds rather than guns?
I want to protect my garden. my neighbors threaten to steal my tomatoes once they start growing.
Right. Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jill. This is a lot of fun.